Okay, so I'm going to be throwing my sweater on in 1 second because it's winter and it's cold. But before I did, I wanted to show you guys something. First of all, here's my bump progress. It's still super tiny, but it is there. And second of all, look at this hair. You cannot tell me anything with this hair. Look at this. It is like inches away from being at my tailbone. So yeah, that was super cool. I wanted to share it because I don't know if you've been following me for a while, but if you have, you would know that I lost a good 70% of my hair after the army. The army bun took me out, okay? My hair was gone. And I ended up cutting it up to my shoulders, and I was wearing clip-ins, it was not good. But my hair was down to my tailbone before I went into the army, so it took a really long time to get here, and I had balding spots over here, and they grew in, and it's just the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I couldn't not show you guys though. I told you last episode that I was pregnant. I wanted to show you guys a little update, but the hair, man. All right, back to normally scheduled programming. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Dana Tripiana, and I cover infamous gangsters on my show, Mob Times, which comes out typically on Tuesdays. If you like mafia history, if you like notorious old-time gangsters, or if you like true crime content, you have come to the right place because that's what we do here. So I just finished up my series on Stefano Magaddino, and that ended up being a 6-part series, which is absolutely crazy. It's the longest series I've ever done, and I told you guys that I was going to move on to the Yakuza next. I came literally within an inch of putting this episode on hold so that I could move on to the Gemini twins, and I really just want to stop real quick and talk a little bit about why I almost did that and why I decided not to. So if you're a female and you were born anywhere from 1985 to 2005, you probably watched and probably really enjoyed Pretty Little Liars. I watched the first 3 or 4 seasons and then I gave up. It kind of went in I don't know. I didn't like it anymore. But I really loved it during the time that I did watch it. One of the main characters on that show was Lucy Hale, and she played a girl named Aria. A girl that's 16 years old, dating a 25-plus-year-old man that's a teacher, and people rooted for the relationship, and it was weird, and I think that kind of fits today's episode too. Anyways, Pretty Little Liars ended, and most of the girls that were stars on that show ended up going to do movies. And Lucy Hale is probably the second most famous out of them. I think I see Hannah on a lot more movies, but Lucy Hale, I see her all over the place. I love her. So I definitely watch what she does. Well, Miss Lucy Hale went on to make a movie called Inside Man, and it's about the Gemini Lounge. There was quite a few inaccuracies in that movie, but I do want to stop and say I am fairly certain I was robbed on behalf of that movie, okay? I'm pretty sure. I can't prove it. I'm not going to take it to court or anything, but I do think that somebody watched my video and then made a movie. It was just weird. The whole thing was weird. Little things that most of the other people that made videos about DeMeo didn't really focus on came up in this movie. I was thinking it the whole movie, but I was like, no, I'm just being a narcissist. I'm being full of myself. There's no way I had anything to do with this movie. Tons of people make videos about Roy DeMeo. I'm not special. It couldn't be my channel. My channel is small. No way. Okay, to be fair, sure, I haven't heard many people focus on his days as a butcher's apprentice or how he always enjoyed cooking and he believed that it was the Italian males that cooked more and they were better cooks than females. And I hadn't heard a lot of other people talk about his brother that died in Korea. But hey, I got that information. They could too. The thing that cinched it for me was when the main character told a story about how his sister died. Wouldn't you know it, that story was ripped off from another mobster, Mr. Richard Kuklinski. It just so happens that I posted a video about Richard Kuklinski about a month after I posted the video about Roy DeMeo, and then about a year later, Inside Man came out. What a coincidence, right? It's just so weird, I'm just saying, I think it's a little weird. And listen, I recognize that I put these videos out on YouTube for free. My content is public, and it can be consumed however anybody pleases. I've had people write books based on my content. I've had people write up professional speaking engagement presentations, and I don't have an issue with any of this. What I have an issue with is when my content is taken and I'm not even acknowledged. Like, at least those people let me know that they were doing this stuff. Like, okay, so you're just gonna come onto my channel, watch my video, and adapt it into a blockbuster movie with this big-time actress, and not one time are you gonna mention that you got pretty much every single word of your research from my channel? That's cool. And while you're at it, give the wrong names for the Gemini twins while using the real names for everybody else. If you're gonna use my content, Jesus Christ, please at least use it correctly. On top of that, at the end of the movie, they put out this little writing blurb, and it talked about how the Gemini twins were still in jail to that day, but they never mentioned the fact that they were due to be out of jail in like 6 months after the video came out. And true enough, like 6 months after that movie came out, they were released and they're chilling somewhere right now, free as a bird. And those offenses aren't even as bad as the way that they depicted Roy DeMeo of killing the vacuum salesman. They had such an opportunity to make a cinematic moment with a car chase going down a Long Island suburb, and they just didn't. They pretended that he shot a few shots off and the vacuum salesman died, and that is not what happened. The whole goddamn movie pissed me off, but whatever. It is what it is. If I were you, I would pass on the movie, but I'm not gonna lie, I do feel like the content that I put out in the Roy DeMeo video was kind of taken, and I think it's really messed up when you have someone that has a very small following like me, and you use that content without ever acknowledging it. Like, you could have at least put a thanks to this YouTube channel, and that would have helped me a lot. So, I don't know. Again, I can't confirm any of it. I don't plan on doing anything about it, but I did want to mention it. So yeah, I wanted to vent a little bit about that. I was gonna do the Gemini twins instead when I saw that movie, but then I hated the movie enough that I was like, you know what? I'm just going back to my original gangster that I had planned and I had promised to you guys, so we're gonna go ahead and do that. So let's move over to the gangster that I did choose this week. First of all, I do think that this is going to be a 2-part episode. It's definitely not going to be 6 parts, but I do think that we're probably going to move into the 2-part episode because there's a lot of slides on this. I got the idea to make this episode, and I ultimately stuck with it around the time that TikTok got banned in the United States and everybody was flooding Red Note, and I know that Red Note is centered in China. But when that happened, I was thinking, like, I know that Asia has some serious gangs and a lot of organized crime, and I've never even looked that way. So let's go ahead and remedy that today. Now, please keep in mind that if you think I have trouble pronouncing Italian words when I grew up with people speaking Italian all over me, I am absolutely useless with Japanese words, names, and places, okay? I know this. I've done research, I've looked up the names. It's still gonna be hard. I am doing my best here. I'm sorry, okay? I'm trying. And also, before I hop into this episode, I do want to note that I'm not going to have all of the information that there is to have on this gangster. I wish that I could translate Japanese to English and get all the information that there is to have on him, but the fact of the matter is that I only speak English, and there's a lot of reading material about this gangster that's only available in Japanese. So I'm just giving you guys all the information that I can compile that was available in English, and I may miss some things. I may mispronounce things, and I might have some wrong info that I got from the sources that I was able to get to. I have absolutely no way of triple checking the information that I have in this episode today. So this episode just today is purely for entertainment purposes only, okay? The FBI doesn't keep track of international gangsters, and there is damn sure no FBI documentation on this gangster. So I'm doing the best I can. If you guys hear any info and you know for a fact that it isn't true, and you have some additional reading resources that I can view, please be my guest. Educate me. But I just used the information that was available. I also am more than happy to be wrong. If you show me that there's a source available that will show that something that I said is incorrect, please be my guest. Please educate me. Let's do it. I want to learn, okay? I'm just giving you guys here what I could dig up. So if you guys aren't comfortable with viewing this episode that's going to be for entertainment purposes only, knowing that there is more information available on this gangster that I just don't have access to, unfortunately, you might have to skip this episode, but I hope that you stay just for my witty banter alone. I don't know. I'm a cool person to hang out with, I think. So since I'm usually doing the American Mafia on this channel and the history behind the American Mafia and gangsters within the American Mafia, I have gone over the Mafia and how it works, how it's shaped, what the hierarchy is, what the tradition is, what everything entails ad nauseum, okay? So since I've never gone over to the Asian continent, we're gonna go over the Yakuza gang from square one. And then we'll whittle it down to this week's gangster. So let's go ahead and get into it. The Yakuza is also known as Ninkyo Dantai, or chivalrous organization, and they are an organized crime group in Japan with a complex and deep-rooted history, and it has a lot of influence in Japanese society. The term Yakuza most likely originates from a losing hand of a traditional Japanese card game that's known as Ochio Kabu, and this is what is the worst hand that can be dealt in this game. It consists of the number 8, which is Ya, 9, which is Ku, and 3, which is Za. So, Yakuza. The association reflects the Yakuza's outlaw status in Japanese society, and also how they're well known to be intertwined with illegal gambling. And it's the same thing as the Mafia over here in America. They're very well known as being involved in illegal gambling in America. Same thing with the Yakuza. They do illegal card games, mostly this game, Ochio Kabu. And in America, they they usually focus more on poker. So, it makes sense. Yakuza groups are really well known for their elaborate rituals, for the members' loyalty to the organization, and for a strong sense of tradition within the Yakuza gang. The Yakuza are usually distinguished by their intricate tattoos, which cover a large portion of the bodies of the gangsters that are in the Yakuza. And they serve as a symbol of their identity and their affiliation with the gang. And this is nothing new. I mean, we've covered the Bloods on this channel. We've looked at the tattoos that go into those gangs. Every gang across the world has tattoos and symbols that belong to that gang, and it shows off that you're a member of that gang. It makes sense that the Yakuza would have their own tattoos that would help other members of Yakuza identify where within that gang they belong. Yakuza overall is involved in a wide range of criminal activities, very similar to the way that the gangs over here are. They're heavily into extortion, gambling, drug trafficking, prostitution, human trafficking, loan sharking, the list goes on, and it's no different if you're looking at the Mafia, if you're looking at the Bloods, or if you're looking at the Yakuza. They do illegal shit. Much like the Mafia over here in America, the Yakuza has a lot of legitimate businesses that are owned by the Yakuza in general or by the members that are in the Yakuza. And that is a way that they're able to launder money and expand their influence, because I'm sure that Japan is the same kind of thing that we have over here, which is known over here as the IRS. And as we know from looking at the American Mafia, or really any gang in general, a huge reason that they do this, that they have these legitimate businesses that they run, is because if you don't, the government will come after you. And doesn't matter if it's here, Japan, anywhere in the world, the government is the biggest, most dangerous gangsters that exist. So you don't really want to rub up against them. So you do things like legitimate businesses to wash the money and make yourself seem like you have a legitimate source of income that's going to back all of your big purchases. The largest and most powerful Yakuza organization seems to be the Yamaguchi Gumi, which has always dominated the Japanese underworld. And when the Yakuza got big, it's because the Yamaguchi Gumi got big. While the Yakuza in general has faced a lot of increased scrutiny over the years and a lot of pressure from law enforcement, they continue to operate on both the criminal and legitimate sectors of society, and it makes them a big organization in both sides of society, the criminal and the legitimate. In Japan, the Yakuza are organized into various crime families or syndicates, which are known as kumi, within the larger Yakuza network. So let's do a quick review of the most well-known and influential Yakuza groups that I was able to find. The first one, of course, is the Yamaguchi Gumi. This is the largest and most powerful Yakuza organization, and they have a long history and a significant presence in the criminal underworld. This is the Gambino family of the Mafia, okay? They're the most well-known, they're the most powerful, and it's who you think of when you think of the Yakuza. The Sumiyoshi Kai is another major Yakuza syndicate, and they operate mainly in the Kansai region, including in Osaka. The Ingawa Kai is one of the largest Yakuza groups, and they have strong ties to the construction industry, and they have a significant presence in Tokyo, Japan. The Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi, they formed as a breakaway faction from the Yamaguchi-gumi, and the group operates primarily in the Kobe area, obviously, and they've gained a lot of prominence over recent years. To be 100% honest, I don't really know the separation between the Yamaguchi-gumi and the Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi, because as far as I know, the original Yamaguchi-gumi is pretty heavy in Kobe. That's where today's gangster Kazuo Taoka comes from, so I would assume that they have a heavy presence there, but who am I to question? Speaking of breakaway groups, you've got the Ninkyao Yamaguchi-gumi, and this is another splinter group from the original Yamaguchi-gumi, center. And this group is known for its adhesion to the traditional Yakuza code of chivalry, which is also known as the Ninkyao. You've got the Dojinkai, which is a Yakuza organization based in Fukuoka. I know I messed that up. I'm sorry. And this gang is known for its involvement in various criminal activities. They don't even have, a niche. They just get into everything. The Kyokuto Kai is a Yakuza gang that are mainly operating in Tokyo and the eastern region of Japan. And they have a really big reputation for their ruthless tactics. They have no issues killing you, okay? In Mafia terms, this is the Chicago family, okay? Think Al Capone taking out civilians because they're voting for a guy he doesn't like. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting from this gang. The Sakayumi-gumi is a smaller organization in the Yakuza, and they're based in Osaka. And this group is well known for their adhesion to traditional Yakuza organization activities. Think like the Buffalo family with someone like Stefano Magadino in charge that's just going to do traditional shit. We're going back to the old days and we're doing things by the book here. The Matsuba Kai is a Yakuza organization that's based in Tokyo, and it's been around since about the 1950s after World War II. Now, this was a combination of two groups, the Sekin-gumi and the Fujita-gumi. The two groups had fallen apart on their own during World War II and under the US occupation of Japan, so they combined to create the Matsuba Kai after World War II, and they were just trying to rebuild, and it was just easier to do it together. These guys are a part of a federation that's called the Kanto Hatsuka Kai, which alongside the Sumiyoshi Kai, the Ingawa Kai, the Tao Kai, and the Soa Kai, it makes them a very strong federation because these are some big guys over here. This federation is currently sitting around 360 members as of 2020. We've got the Kyokuto Kai, and this organization is also operating in Tokyo. I feel like I've said that word a lot of times. And they ended up bumping heads against the Matsuba Kai in the early 2000s. And they're currently sitting somewhere around 430 members. So that's a little higher than the Matsuba Kai. So even though you've got the Matsuba Kai being a combination of two different groups and being a part of this larger federation, the Kyokuto Kai still has bigger numbers. Now, these are just some of the prominent Yakuza families in Japan. There's still a lot more. There's over 500 gangs that are considered to be part of the Yakuza. These are just the ones that I found that stuck out. So, I know that there's a lot of other ones. I'm not diminishing the other groups by not mentioning them here. These are just the ones that popped out. I don't know. And each one of these guys have their own history, their own leadership structure, their own hierarchy structure, their own areas that they influence, and they all have their own thing that they do more. There's certain ones that do construction, certain ones do white collar crime, certain ones are bigger in gambling. You're gonna see individual things on individual gangs throughout the Yakuza, very similar to any organized crime structure anywhere else you look. So now that we went through a general layout of what the Yakuza looks like as a whole, let's take a deeper look into each of these individual groups. We're just going to take a quick look at key characteristics of each of these gangs or families or syndicates or groups or whatever you want to call them. I'm calling them gangs. Let me know if that's wrong. That's what they are. They're a gang. So that's what we call them. So first off, let's talk a little bit about the Yamaguchi-gumi because first of all, the gangster that we're covering today is a huge member of the Yamaguchi-gumi, and second of all, it's the biggest gang in the entire Yakuza, so we're going to discuss it first. The Yamaguchi-gumi is a notorious Yakuza organization, and it played a prominent role in Japan's criminal underworld for decades. It really helped to create the Yakuza overall. This gang was founded in 1915 or 16 by Hariucki Yamaguchi, and the group originally served as a labor union. This labor union catered to dock workers in Kobe, Japan, before it ended up evolving into a super powerful criminal organization. Think of it the way that you think of the Sicilian mafia, that was really just a government in Sicily until Mussolini came around and decimated the mafia and put an actual government in place, and the government of Italy took over ruling Sicily, and they just kind of remained as the mafia after that happened. Same thing here. These guys were a labor union and eventually turned into a crime syndicate, but usually when you have these super powerful gangs, the background comes from leadership. And really, what else is a union other than like leadership? Now, at this point in 2025, that means that the Yamaguchi Gumi has been around for over a century, and that kind of solidifies its place in the history of the Yakuza, of organized crime. Like, this is a founding group. Currently, they're sitting at around 3,500 active members as of the end of 2023. And that's a lot of people. Like, if you look up the American Mafia, Google says there's about 3,000 people in the American Mafia as of today. Now, is that true? No. There's a lot more than that. But I got the number of 3,500 in the Yamaguchi Gumi from Google. So, I mean, they have the same thing working against them. I'm sure there's more in the Yamaguchi Gumi. I'm sure there's more in the American Mafia. But it's interesting to see that, you know, the Yamaguchi Gumi is only one gang in the Japanese organized crime syndicate. And they have more than the entire American Mafia as per Google. This group operates through a strict hierarchical structure with a komicho, or a godfather, that leads the organization, and a network of regional bosses, or wakagashira, which is kind of like a deputy godfather. And they oversee various territories. So like capos, you know, you got the boss of an American Mafia family, then you got capos, they rule, you know, their individual places. Same thing here. Now, while the Yakuza was formed a very long time ago, they didn't really blow up into who they are now or the level that they're known at now until way later, after World War II. That's when Kazuo Taoka took over, and he was the one that would really blow this thing up into a gigantic organization. But before World War II, this was kind of a small-time gang. They weren't really trying to be big-time. A lot of members and leaders in the Yakuza, they all believe that the difference between them and like some common street thug and mafiosi is their goodwill towards others. They have always rushed to do what good that they could for other citizens, for other people in general. If you don't do charity work, if you don't do outreach with your local community, if you don't treat civilians around you with extreme respect, then the Yakuza will no longer be the Yakuza. Now, that comes with some rules. You don't cause problems for civilians. You don't bother people that aren't gangsters, aka civilians. You do good when the opportunity arises. And now this is on top of the existing rules. Like, there's a lot of rules. You don't mess around with another member's wife or family member. You don't start gang wars unless it's expressly approved by the higher-ups. You don't snitch, omerta, you don't disrespect seniors in your organization, the list goes on, and under no circumstances do you bother citizens in your area. You always make sure that gang activity stays within the gang. You don't bother other people, okay? The Yamaguchi Gumi is known for its involvement in a wide array of illegal activities, including extortion, gambling, prostitution, drug trafficking, arms smuggling, financial crimes. They cover the entire spectrum. This organization in particular has also expanded its operations into legitimate businesses, using front companies to launder money and maintain their position in society as upstanding citizens and not just outright gangsters. The fact that when I read off all of the gang names, I read off 2 splinter groups from the Yamaguchi Gumi, it shows a very clear picture that over the years, the Yamaguchi Gumi has faced a lot of internal power struggles. There's been a lot of factional disputes. There's been conflicts with rival Yakuza groups. Like, things have not been smooth sailing for these guys, and it rarely is for any gang. Like, you're doing crime, you're probably not gonna have a lot of people around you that just, you know, have the most strong moral compass. criminals, by definition, not exactly the most upstanding citizens, okay? But despite all of this crime and all their criminal activities, the Yamaguchi-gumi has also been involved in a lot of charitable endeavors. They engage in criminal enterprise, legitimate businesses, philanthropic efforts. They are just a very complex and multifaceted gang, syndicate, whatever you want to call them. And it shows in the amount of power that they have in Japan's underworld and Japan as a whole. The Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi is the Yakuza organization that emerged as the breakaway faction from the overall Yamaguchi-gumi, like the big syndicate. So here's a little bit of information and facts about the Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi. They were formed in 2015, so pretty recently. And they were formed after a split from the Yamaguchi-gumi, which had been experiencing a lot of internal discord and a lot of power struggles within the Yamaguchi-gumi. The breakaway faction was led by Kunio Inoue, and he became the organization's leader. Kunio, who's also known as Choyu, has the same hierarchical structure. It's the same as the Yamaguchi-gumi, same everything as the parent organization, same godfather, same deputy godfather, same everything, just a different group. They since established their presence in the Kansai region and sought to expand their influence through their initial strongholds. Now, the Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi has had a lot of beef with the original Yamaguchi-gumi, and it has heightened a lot of tensions and a lot of conflict between these two organizations. The formation of the Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi in the first place was a huge fracture from the Yakuza landscape. And both of them are vying to control this territory in Kobe that the Yamaguchi-gumi had always led. And they really don't do much different from their parent organization. They do the same crimes, they do the same hierarchy, everything is exactly the same, just separate. The Sumiyoshi Kai is one of the most prominent and powerful Yakuza crime syndicates in Japan. Based in the Kansai region, with its stronghold in Osaka, the Sumiyoshi Kai is another really powerful gang in the Yakuza. They've been around for a lot of decades, and they were founded in the post-World War II era, and since grown into one of the largest and wealthiest Yakuza organizations that exists. This organization was in the middle of a scandal in 1932, where a bunch of military men raided and killed the Prime Minister of Japan in what came to be known as the May 15th incident, because it happened on May 15th in 1932. Now, there was 11 people that went and took out this prime minister. And the 11 people that went and took the prime minister out, they were lauded as heroes by the people of Japan. Think of the way that Americans feel about Luigi Mangione. That's how the people of Japan felt about these 11 people that took out the prime minister. And because of that, the people of Japan were like cutting off fingers and sending it to the government on their behalf. And because of the discord, they ended up getting really light sentences for taking out the prime minister. This incident would come to be known as the end of democracy and the beginning of a military state in Japan. Now, one of those 11 people would get out of jail a lot of years early. Again, very lenient sentences were given to each of these 11 people. One of them would get out really early, and he would become a right-wing activist. And he would create a group that would later come to be known as the Jirasusha. I don't know if I know I'm saying that wrong. But anyway, this group that he created, the Jirasusha, the Sumiyoshi Kai boss would take over the Jirasusha, and the headquarters for the Jirasusha would come to be a recruitment center for the Yakuza. And an interesting fact here is that Charlie Chaplin was almost killed in the May 15th incident. The people that were doing the insurrection here, they were going for Charlie Chaplin. That was the whole point of this whole scandal. They were going for the prime minister, the prime minister's son, and they were going for Charlie Chaplin, who was in town visiting for some publicity thing. And the people that were doing the insurrection thought that if they could get their hands on a celebrity as big as Charlie Chaplin, that it would send a message and it would get their point across a lot faster. Charlie Chaplin had just so happened to go out with the prime minister's son that night to go see a sumo fight. And they both ended up living because they went to go see this sumo fight, which would end up being like an act of pure luck that he wasn't murdered in this insurrection as was planned, because he was an intended target, but also would be like the only time that sumo wrestling ever saved a life, okay? The Sumiyoshi Kai primarily operates in the Kansai region, which includes cities like Osaka, Kyoto, and Kobe. This gang is doing everything criminal. They do a lot of extortion, gambling, drug trafficking, prostitution, loan sharking, but this group in particular focuses a little more on white-collar crimes than the other groups. The syndicate has a strong presence in the entertainment and construction industries. The Sumiyoshi Rengo is a federation of Yakuza affiliated with the Sumiyoshi Kai and one of the major Yakuza syndicates in Japan. So let's talk about them a little bit. The Sumiyoshi Rengo is an alliance of smaller Yakuza organizations that are affiliated with the Sumiyoshi Kai. These groups come together under an umbrella of the Sumiyoshi Rengo, which serves as a federation of Yakuza clans. Because each of these individual gangs is actually really small, and that makes them very vulnerable. So by banding together under the Sumiyoshi Rengo umbrella, each of these groups are given a lot of resources, manpower, influence, and it's a lot of protection. The Ingawa Kai is one of the most prominent and influential Yakuza crime syndicates in Japan. Like, this is one of the big dogs. So let's talk about them a little bit. The Ingawa Kai has a long history that dates back to the early 20th century. It's one of the largest Yakuza organizations in Japan, and it has a strong presence in Tokyo and the surrounding areas around Tokyo. They were officially founded in 1948, and they're considered the third largest Yakuza group to this day. This gang goes a lot heavier into gambling, and that's where their seed money really comes from. They have a heavy presence all along the eastern Japan. They're pretty heavy in the Tokyo metropolitan area, and they're known for their control over a lot of criminal activity in the region. So, like, they have their own gang, and then they control what other gangs in the area does. And they are also pretty heavy in the construction industry, but they're also pretty big in the real estate market as well. The syndicate specializes in construction kickbacks. They do stock market manipulation, and they focus a lot more on that than the other Yakuza groups do. The Dojinkai is a Yakuza organization based in Fukuoka, Japan, and it is one of the most powerful and prominent crime syndicates in the Kyushu region. So let's talk about them for a second. They've been around for several decades, and they established themselves as a pretty significant player in the Yakuza organization and the Yakuza underworld as a whole. They primarily operate in the Kyushu region, and they're based in Fukuoka. The syndicate has a strong presence in cities like Kitakyushu and Nagasaki. This syndicate is pretty well known for their strong presence in the local community and for their engagement in various illicit enterprises. So they have a lot of citizen outreach, okay? They deal with the people that are not in the gang a lot more than other gangs. So since we're being introduced to this region of the world and the gang as a whole for the first time, let's go through some important terms from this gang and what it means before we move on to the individual gangster. I'm going to put Japanese letters on the screen to show the words that I'm saying in Japanese. I found this list on Reddit, and I'll throw a link to that Reddit user and the list that they put originally up, because I can't imagine how much work it must have taken to put this list together, so that writer deserves to be cited at the very least. So here's the link. So this Reddit poster has a lot, and I mean a lot, of terms and long explanations, and we're not going to go through every single one of them because I swear to God I'd be here for an hour if I did. I'm just going to go through the important ones that I might see popping up later on. So he mentioned that he was playing a game that was based on the Yakuza, and that's what led him to put this glossary together. So if you're interested, there's a game about the Yakuza out there if you want to play, but let's get into these keywords. There's a Nikiban, or someone's senior or their older brother type figure in the Yakuza. It's often shorthanded as Iniki, and the opposite is Ototoban, which is sometimes referred to as Shatai. And I think of this in terms of a sorority. I've never been in a sorority, but I know that sororities have like a big and a little, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's that kind of thing. It's like someone's mentor. Like this one person brings them through, they show them the ropes, they teach them the history of the group that they're a part of, and they help them immerse in this new culture that they're being thrown into. Working off the list for a second, but this is an important one that you need to know, is the Oyabun-Kobun relationship, and that's what's known as the father-son relationship. It's like a protege relationship, like a mentor-mentee relationship. Everyone in the Yakuza has one, but the Oyabun can be one particular person's Oyabun, or it can be the oyabun of the entire syndicate. It just means like your boss. Taoka was called the oyabun as the leader of the Yamaguchi-gumi. Each gang has dozens of shatai, or younger brothers, and many wakushu, or junior leaders. Okite is a creed. It's like a set of rules that everybody in the Yakuza has to follow. You got Kijin, and this term roughly translates to responsibility. It's the idea that you have to take accountability. It's pretty much giving penance, paying for your own actions or your own screw-ups by sacrificing something like money, territory, status, or a lot of times, a pinky finger. Gokudu is a term for the Yakuza and one that's known as more honorable than the rest. This is often translated as the extreme path. And if you think about it in terms of the Mafia, it's the way that the Mafia refers to themselves as like the honored society or our thing. It's the opposite of the word that the police use to refer to them, which is bōryokudan, or roughly translated, the violent ones. Since the Yakuza men do not view themselves as violent, they view themselves as an ancient moral group, they reject the name that the police gave them, and they instead refer to themselves as Gokudu. The Suji is a term that refers to a metric that determines whether something that a gangster does is appropriate given the situation. Like, punching someone random on the street is bad Suji, but punching someone who punched you first passes the Suji test. This is one of the origins of the term Sujimon, which just simply means Yakuza. Wakagashira, I already brought this term up. It's the lieutenant. It's the second in command of the Yakuza family. Think of like the underboss. Literally translated, it translates into young head, and it's sometimes shortened to Kashira, but yeah, it's the underboss of the family. Now, below the Wakagashira is the Fuku Hanbucho, and he's the head of multiple gangs. After him in the ranks is a regional boss with responsibility over less men, and he's called a Shatai Gashira Hosa. And again, I know I'm butchering the hell out of these names. I swear to God, guys, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm trying to give the most respect to these names as I possibly can. I'm just really bad at pronunciation. Go look at any of the videos that I'm trying to say Italian words. I just suck at it. It's not disrespect. It's not anything other than me being dumb, okay? I promise. Yubizum is punishment for displeasing or disappointing one's boss, which often leads to the amputation of the last joint of your pinky, and this is a tradition that was carried on by the samurai. So, now that we've gone over key words, if I'm being completely honest, I have flip-flopped a lot about who was going to be the actual center of today's episode. I just knew that I wanted to cover somebody in the Yakuza, and originally I was going to do Taoka, but then I found out about Hariucki Yamaguchi, and I was like, oh, score, let's go. The godfather of the Yakuza, like, absolutely, let's do him. He's the Lucky Luciano of the Yakuza. That's awesome. But then I went and I kept researching, and I kept researching, and I found literally nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing on him. I was honestly tossing up and down whether or not to just pass on this episode as a whole. Like, there's so little information out there about any of these guys. But as far as Hariucki Yamaguchi goes, there's nothing. There's nothing about his parents. There's nothing about how he grew up. There's nothing about anything. There's barely anything about how he formed the Yakuza in the first place. There's nothing. So I made a decision and I hopped back over to Taoka, because as little information is available about him, there's a whole lot more than is available for Yamaguchi. So I want to go over what little information I have about Yamaguchi, and then we'll hop over to today's gangster again. Now, Hariucki Yamaguchi, this is the guy that's known as the godfather of the Yamaguchi-gumi gang, or the clan, or syndicate, or whatever. And he remains a figure of intrigue, reverence, like, he just goes down as the person responsible for the Yakuza, I guess. I don't know. His imprint on the criminal landscape of Japan is just unspoken. Everybody in Japan knows who Hariucki Yamaguchi is. The guy's a legend. I mean, if you look at it, he built the Yamaguchi-gumi, who is the most powerful gang in all of Japan, which is super impressive. And it started out as a labor union for dock workers. Like, who would have saw that coming? While there's a whole lot more information on Lucky Luciano than there is on Hariucki Yamaguchi, for all I know, there's a whole lot of information available to those who can read Japanese. So maybe there is a lot more information out there that I just don't have access to. So pretty much everything about Yamaguchi, his life, his legacy, everything he ever did is absolutely a race to the world. It's entirely possible that it does exist. It was just never translated into English, but for the purposes of this video, because I would assume if you're listening to my video, you speak English, we're going to assume that everything that is available about him in English is everything that's available about him. So we're going to assume it's pretty much erased. It doesn't exist. And as we know, that's the mark of a truly great mafia boss. If every single thing that you've ever done is well known to the public, what does that mean? It means somebody ratted on you or you got caught. Nobody publicizes their criminal shenanigans on purpose. Well, as long as they're alive, they don't. I've had high-ranking mafia members in my family that have written books about the crimes that they did and all the crazy shit that they got into in the mafia, but they left the book to me to be delivered after they died. I never ended up getting the book, which is absolutely heartbreaking, but he knew he was dying and he wanted to share his life with me, so it would have been really cool to get that book, but that book was only available after he died. And that's the same thing with Hariucki Yamaguchi. He never got ratted out. He never shared his criminal shenanigans. And whether or not he wanted his information to be available after he died, it's an unknown, because it's just not available. The fact that Yamaguchi's criminal escapades have never been made public doesn't mean that he didn't do amazing things. It means that he was a powerhouse with super loyal followers. So the shit that he did never went mainstream. He never got ratted out, and that's okay. We don't have to know everything. As the Yamaguchi-gumi expanded its reach and they expanded their grip on power, Yamaguchi's hand was pretty much in everything that went on in the organization, even after he handed over control. The Yakuza was called the world's largest organized crime syndicate in terms of size and second in terms of revenue by Fortune magazine. According to them, in 2014, the Yamaguchi-gumi had 10,300 active members, 13,100 associate members, and 44% of Yakuza members were in the Yamaguchi-gumi, which is pretty freaking impressive numbers. As far as the Yakuza as a whole, there's 184,000 members, divided in 5,200 gangs throughout the entire country of Japan, which think about the scope of that. That is insanity. And this is no small-time organization. This is a huge-scale operation that has to be managed meticulously to maintain order and peace throughout all of these factions. There was a succession of leaders after Hariucki Yamaguchi gave over power. After Yamaguchi, he handed over power to his son, Noboru Yamaguchi, and he would take over and be the next leader of the Yamaguchi-gumi. And Noboru would lead the gang through World War II. He took over in 1925, and he would hand over leadership in 1942. It doesn't look like there was a decisive leader from 1942 to 1946, and then in 1946, Kazuo Taoka was the one that took over control of the Yamaguchi-gumi, and he would expand it into what it is known now. And Taoka is who we're going to be covering today. Kazuo Taoka, or Kuma as he goes by, or the Bear translated, is one of the Yamaguchi-gumi's most notorious successors. He got his nickname of the Bear for his style of fighting. He would claw at his opponent's eyes and sometimes gouge their eyes out, so he was brutal. Kuma was a prominent Yakuza godfather, and he would be the third Kumicho of the Yamaguchi-gumi from 1946 all the way until 1981. He was also known as the Godfather of Godfathers and the Japanese Godfather. Taoka played a significant role in bringing the Yamaguchi-gumi from a small-time gang that they were when he took over to one of the world's largest criminal syndicates during a very short period of time. If you think about it, he only led for 40-something years, less than 40 years. He survived an assassination attempt in 1978 and would end up passing away in 1981. So that's why he handed over control. He just died. Taoka was involved in various criminal activities like extortion, labor racketeering, gambling, prostitution, loan sharking, smuggling, and pretty much every criminal activity you can think of, Taoka was involved in. Kazuo came into the Yamaguchi-gumi as a street fighter. And when he came into the gang, they were very, very small. Very, very small. And then when he took over leadership, they were even smaller. They were a very small, tight-knit little gang. And they really just worked in unions and offered aid to the communities that they were a part of. This was not a large-scale operation by any means before Kazuo Taoka took over. But that wasn't enough for him. He was able to see so much more potential to this organization that it just hadn't realized yet. And he was set on realizing that potential. Now, one thing that Kazuo really had in common with early American mafia bosses was his adamance to avoid any kind of drug activity. He absolutely hated drugs. He put a no questions ban on any kind of drug trading. He didn't want drug trading, importing, exporting, sales, nothing. No dealing, no nothing. Do not touch drugs, do not go near drugs, absolutely no drugs. If anything, under Kazuo, the Yamaguchi-gumi worked to eradicate drugs from the streets of Japan. Now, that philosophy is still pretty much in effect in the gang to this day, today, with their current leader, Suzuka, and they kind of currently have the same feelings about drugs that they did back then. They don't like them. But while I say this, keep in mind that the same thing goes for Yakuza as does for the Mafia. Yes, they have a no questions asked complete ban on drugs, but where does the majority of their income come from? The sale of drugs. So let's talk about Taoka and how he came to be who he was when he was in the Yakuza. He was born on the island of Shikao in Japan on March 28, 1913. And don't quote me there, because if you read 5 different sources, you're going to get 5 different answers for exactly where he's from. He's from somewhere on the southern island of Japan. Let's just call it that. There's different names for different towns. This is where he's from. This island on Japan. In Japan. I don't know. It's not in Long Island, it's on Long Island. I don't know what you say on Japan, okay? Now, Taoka is not in Yamaguchi's bloodline, so how did he come to be the boss after Yamaguchi's son? Well, that's easy. Taoka was orphaned as a young child, and he would be taken in by a very important Yakuza member. A very important Yamaguchi-gumi member. The member. Noboru Yamaguchi. The family that Taoka was born into was extremely poor. He had 5 siblings, and to make matters worse, his father died while his mother was pregnant with him, so he would be the youngest of these 5 siblings. So now we have an impoverished family with no father and a brand new baby. And this is an absolute recipe for disaster. When Kazuo was only 6 years old, his mother passed away, and that would leave 6 children orphaned. The children relocated to Kobe to be raised by their aunt and uncle, and that situation somehow got worse than the situation that they had just left. How do you get worse than an impoverished family of 6 children with only one parent? Well, you add into the mix an alcoholic, abusive uncle and a space cadet of an aunt. You gotta realize that these people didn't want kids. They didn't get pregnant. They didn't plan a life with these kids. No, these 6 children were thrust upon them, and it did not work out well. The Taoka children were regularly subjected to the uncle's drunken beatings. He would stumble into the house after a long day at the factory and just lay down punishment on the first person he saw. Kazuo was the subject of these beatings regularly. After being subjected to so much tragedy and so much violence from such a young age, he became a street fighter. Of course he did. Scrapping is the only thing that he knows. He would go and scrap on the streets to have his basic needs met. You need food, you go fight someone for it. His aunt and uncle can't be bothered to care for him, to raise him, to feed him. So he would go into the world and get what he needed on his own. Things finally started to look up for Kazuo in middle school when he made a new friend. He hadn't had very many friends up until this point. Even though his area was not a nice area by any means, very few kids had to deal with the kind of shit that Kazuo had to deal with in his life. And that kind of puts you on a different level than people your age. You become a lot more mature than other people your age, and you don't generally have a lot of friends. You can't relate to those around you. They're playing games. They're playing hopscotch while you're trying to fight on the streets for food. You're not gonna make a lot of friends that way. And you end up annexing yourself. That was until the new friend that he made when he was a teenager, Hideo Yamaguchi. And Hideo would see through Kazuo's tough, rough exterior, and he would see the inner turmoil that this poor boy was dealing with on a regular basis. Now, remember when I tell you, the Yamaguchi-gumi was a very small gang when Kazuo became a part of it, so I'm pretty sure that when he became friends with Hideo, Kazuo had no idea that Hideo was the son of Hariucki Yamaguchi or any idea who Hariucki Yamaguchi was. He had no idea he was the younger brother of Noboru Yamaguchi. Like, this was not that big of a gang that everybody in the place would know who it is. It's not like meeting the son of John Gotti. Like, nobody knows who these guys are because this is a very small-time gang. Kazuo just saw a friend, a fellow classmate that would look past his troubles and want to have a conversation with him, so they became fast friends. And that friendship would change his life forever. Now, it didn't take a long time until Hideo took Kazuo home and introduced him to his older brother. His older brother being Noboru Yamaguchi, who is the head of the Yamaguchi-gumi at the time. And Noboru would end up taking Kazuo under his wing and kind of mentoring him. Noboru would also look past the rough, tough exterior, and he would see the pain and the turmoil and the trauma this poor boy had been through for such a young age. He was impressed with Kazuo's tenacity, his willingness to learn, his willingness to make friends even through all the trauma that he had experienced, his eagerness to form relationships and close bonds with those people around him. And Noboru became like a father to him very quickly. He didn't have a father. Kazuo had never had a father figure. He had never known love and affection, any kind of kindness from any older man in his life. So Noboru's willingness to be a constant figure in his life made a huge difference in Kazuo's life. Now, that doesn't mean that this was a fast track into the Yakuza, though. Even with Noboru as a guide, a mentor, a father figure, even with Noboru's position in the Yamaguchi-gumi, Kazuo was still determined to stay on the straight and narrow path. He graduated from high school, which is like a huge feat, a gigantic accomplishment for someone going through what Kazuo went through. And he graduated in 1927. So, starting out in the Yakuza, it's not like just because Noboru took Taoka on as a protege, it's not like he just skyrocketed through the ranks. When Taoka first started working for the Yakuza, he would run errands for them. He would people watch, he would learn, he would prove himself over and over and over again. All this boy wanted was to be successful. And that's a huge part of being in organized crime and growing in the organized crime syndicate. Just that you want to fight to be successful, you want to fight to survive, and you want to fit in, you want to be loyal, and you want to gain loyalty from others around you. And remember, Yamaguchi wouldn't take Taoka in until he had already undergone his formidable years. It's not like he adopted him when he was 5. He didn't even meet Yamaguchi until he was well into junior high. This boy was at least 14 when he first met Hideo Yamaguchi. So he had already formed his entire personality by the time he even met Noboru. And Noboru didn't just immediately adopt him. He became a significant presence. He became a mentor, but he didn't adopt him. Taoka didn't leave his aunt and uncle's house to go live with Noboru, as cool as that would be. That's just not what happened. So he still had to fight to survive. He spent his entire formidable years as an orphan, a street urchin, fighting to make it just one more day. And that's what Yamaguchi liked about him. He took him on, adopting him as his protege early on, but make no mistake about it, this kid's life was never easy. Not one day of this kid's life when he was a kid was easy. The Yakuza, the Yamaguchi-gumi, and Noboru and Hideo are the first and only family that Taoka had ever known, and he threw himself into this full force. He made the Yakuza his life. He eagerly learned every lesson that they were willing to teach him. He had no mother or father. He had no friends. He had nobody next to him or in front of him. And this was the first sign of any kind of family, any kind of loyalty to him, or any kind of bond to any other human being that this boy had ever experienced in his entire life. This was the first time anybody had ever been willing to accept him. He felt like he owed everything to this gang and to Noboru and to Hideo, and he gave them everything in him. He realized really early on that in order to earn respect, to earn loyalty, to earn camaraderie, you had to give it. You had to earn respect by giving respect. You had to earn loyalty by giving loyalty. People don't just hand those things over to you. You earn those things through actions, not simply by being there, but simply by showing up. And I think that's why people that come from a rough background thrive so heavily in places like gangs, honestly. It's a brotherhood, it's a friendship. It's a bond that you have with other people that are forged in misery and in happiness, in the first sign of happiness that you ever had in your life. When you don't have parents telling you what a special little star you are just for being alive, you realize that the only way to gain loyalty out of other people is by giving loyalty. It's to show that you can offer it as well. The only way to gain respect is through what you do, the friendships that you form, the bonds that you forge, not just by showing up. There's no participation trophies in this boy's life. The things that you can offer other people, whether it be services, whether it be money, whether it be protection, whatever you can offer other people is what makes people value you. And that really is just, it's the way that you're perceived in society. Do we wish that every single person had parents that made them their entire lives? Absolutely. But when you don't have that, it's very easy to thrive in a gang where you're getting the first signs of loyalty that you've ever gotten, and you're more than willing to give it back. After graduating from high school, Kazuo got a job at the local shipyard. I'm sure that Noboru had a huge part in making this happen for him. The Yamaguchi-gumi led the ports. They originated as a union for dock workers. They had control over all the ports, even when they were a very small organization. So Kazuo's position at the docks is no random feat. Like, he definitely got placed there by Noboru. But it's an ordinary job for someone with such high connections. So he's determined to make this job work. He is getting up every day, going to work, doing his job, and he just keeps doing that until shit goes down. He's working as an apprentice lay operator at a shipyard, and the foreman of the yard starts fucking with him. I'm sure Kazuo turned the other cheek and tried to make it work and tried to just not stir the pot, but at the end of the day, Kazuo was raised the way that Kazuo was raised. He was a street fighter, a young man that had been forged in violence and taught that the only way to get what you want or what you need is to fight. And soon enough, a fight broke out between him and the foreman, which obviously means one thing: he no longer has a job at the shipyard. Now, after being fired from the shipyard because he beat the absolute daylights out of this foreman, he starts running errands for the Yamaguchi-gumi. Honestly, I don't really know why he didn't go straight into that. To be 100% honest, I kind of think that his job at the docks was for the Yamaguchi-gumi, but let's just pretend that it was a straight-up position. Either way, when he left there, he went straight over to the Yamaguchi-gumi, and he started working under Noboru and learning the ways of the Yakuza life very early on. And it's the same thing as Stefano Magaddino. Even though Yamaguchi wasn't technically blood and he wasn't there from a super, super young age, Noboru is the only significant influence on Taoka that he ever had. And he just poured knowledge and love into this child that needed it more than anything and was willing to learn and live whatever life this man would have given him. Even in a violent gang, Kazuo quickly built a reputation as someone that you did not want to mess with. Quickly after he started his job working for the gang, he got his nickname of Kumo, or the Bear, because again, we went over, it's just his way of fighting. He would grow out his nails so that they were sharp, so when he would fight and scratch at someone's eyes, it was easier to gouge them. There was no rules in street fights, no etiquette. There's no unspoken laws. You do what you have to do to survive. This is a fight to the death, and I am going to live to see tomorrow. Kazuo is very aware that every single fight is a mission of survival, and he didn't give a single shit what he had to do to win that fight and keep on living to see tomorrow. So he went for the eyes. And this isn't just a smooth transition for Kazuo. Things are really tough for him trying to learn to adhere to Yamaguchi-gumi's way of life. It's not something that he just picked up on. You gotta think, this kid has never been taught discipline. He's never had anybody over him telling him what he can and can't do, other than, oh, I'm caught in my alcoholic uncle's sight, so I'm gonna catch a beating. Nobody ever told him anything. Nobody taught him right from wrong. Nobody ever had a set of rules that he had to follow. This was the first time in his life, and it took a little bit to get used to for him. Anybody that comes from a tough childhood knows it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of courage, and constant decisions every single day to not revert back to where you were as a kid. Now, take your average person that grew up in a rough childhood and put them into a gang that's known for their adhesion to a strict set of rules. You're gonna have trouble. It just is what it is. Someone that grew up without anybody caring about them, without a curfew, without any kind of set of rules, is going to have trouble when you get those rules thrown at you after you graduated high school, after you're a grown man. It's hard. And Kazuo is a perfect example of this. Even working under the Yamaguchi-gumi, who's all about respect and tradition and professionalism, he still gets in scraps all over the place. He still goes to jail. He still has his fights. This was not just, oh, I love Noboru Yamaguchi, so I'm going to turn a new leaf. Like, there was a lot of setbacks along the way for him. So, as I said, Taoka is running little errands here and there for the Yamaguchi. He would pull night security. He worked as a bouncer at a club. He just did little odd jobs here and there and just scraping by still, trying to make a living and pay the rent. One day, as he's working as a bouncer at a movie theater, he gets into a scuffle with the owner of the movie theater and he throws a hissy fit. Not only does he get into it with the owner, but he starts messing with the owner's business. There's a production going on, and he throws this little temper tantrum, and he goes up on stage and he interrupts the show in the middle of the show with an audience full of people. He's in the middle of the screen throwing shit. He's going on stage with the whole audience during this production and throwing his temper tantrum there so everybody is watching. And this is not good for business. Now, honestly, I think that normally this would be a huge no-no for any member of the Yamaguchi-gumi. Normally, people would be severing fingers and being beaten or killed for this kind of shit. But remember, this is Kazuo Taoka. He's the protege of Noboru Yamaguchi. Noboru understands that this boy has never had any kind of good influence on his life. He's been to hell and back, and he has a real soft spot for him. He doesn't beat or kill him. He doesn't have to give up a pinky for this transgression. He doesn't charge a finger. He doesn't kick him out of the syndicate. He doesn't throw him a beating. But he doesn't just let this slide. Noboru knows that Taoka is acting this way because he lacks discipline. He never had anybody that cared enough about him to try to teach him right from wrong. He lived a hard life, and it shows in the way that he acts. So Noboru decides that he's going to get him that discipline. He's going to take control of the anger that Taoka has simmering below the surface, constantly on the brink of explosion, and he sends Taoka off to sort of like a monastery. They do like samurai fighting, they learn business practices, and it's just one of those places, like if you think of like where monks are, I think that's how you would think of where Taoka was sent to. So now that we've gotten to the point that Kazuo has been sent off to this monastery thing, I think we should end this episode and pick it back up for our final part 2 of today's gangster, Kazuo Taoka. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and you can't wait to find out the rest of the information on today's gangster. Thanks so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, follow, subscribe, do all the things, and I'll see you next week. Bye!